Recently, a report on abuses over the course of 75 years in the Archdiocese of Munich, Germany, was presented, and the report faulted Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI and the current Archbishop of Munich, Cardinal Marx. They and others are accused of mishandling several abuse cases during their tenure. The Vaticano team went back to the archives to see what has been done in the light of growing understanding of the enormity of the abuse scandals and what Benedict has done in order to bring about greater accountability. In January 2002, American Catholicism faced one of the worst institutional and spiritual crises in history. It began when the Boston Globe raised accusations against the Catholic priest in Boston, John J. Gyohan, for abusing more than 130 minors over a 30-year period of ministry, and against his superior, Cardinal Bernard Law, for having covered up the abuses. In Rome, as the American scandal blew up, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and its prefect, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, directly confronted it. In fact, Ratzinger had already been working against abuses in the church for years. After the sexual revolution of 1968, society had been changing. Good and evil had become relative, and some church environments were not able to escape the influence of this crisis.
Sociologists are quite suspicious of monocausal explanations, but surely one cause was the 60s, the relaxation of sexual mores, more or less in all milieus, and the idea that sexual experiments were something good and new and modern and brave and to be encouraged.
As reports of abuse of minors by clergy increased in the 1980s, it was Cardinal Ratzinger who worked to develop adequate instruments to combat these crimes justly and quickly. In 1988, he requested a change to the Church's Code of Canon Law to speed up and simplify the legal process for suspected cases of abuse. His objective was to protect victims, ensure justice, and sanction predators.
Then
the prefect of the CDF, Cardinal Ratzinger, addressed the Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts. At that time, the prefect was the Venezuelan Cardinal Castillo Laura, pointing out that he found more and more frequently that the resignation from the clerical state was requested as a grace, as a gift, when what was needed was punishment, a process. Punishment because these priests had committed criminal behavior.
Y castigar porque habían cometido conductas criminales.
In his 24 years as head of the congregation, Cardinal Ratzinger had zero tolerance for priests or religious who committed abuse against minors.
El Cardenal Ratzinger fue el primero.
Cardinal Ratzinger was the first in the Roman Curia to say no. This cannot be treated as a matter of grace, but as a matter to be judged and punished, and appropriate measures to be taken. He was the first, and he was quite isolated in doing this.
Fue el primero, era bastante aislado.
In 2001, Pope St. John Paul II gave the congregation absolute control over sex abuse cases reported to Rome. Cardinal Ratzinger then published a document, the Church's Norms on Handling the Most Serious of Crimes. In 2010, as Pope, he would make further modifications to improve it. In the final form of this document, bishops were legally bound to report all cases of suspected abuse by clerics in their diocese to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The statute of limitations was extended from 10 to 20 years. Abuse of a person over 18 years of age who is developmentally disabled was added as a grave crime, and child pornography was also listed as a crime.
In particular, one of the signal achievements would be those that were implemented in 2010. In May of 2010, Sacramentum Sanctitatis Tutela was updated, and some new fields which we're still developing today. In particular, we think of child pornography. Added some new crimes to the definition of the delicts against the Sixth Commandment and the codes of canon law. Vos estis lux mundi has continued that and added new as we come to understand the magnitude of these issues that we're facing.
Days later, on April 2nd, 2005, Pope John Paul II died. And on April the 24th, Cardinal Ratzinger succeeded him as Pope, taking the name Benedict XVI. After the 2002 American scandal, victims from other nations began to come forward. In Ireland in 2005, then in Australia, Malta, and Germany. In the face of a seemingly unprecedented spiritual crisis, Benedict XVI started a path of purification and cleansing within the Church. During his pontificate, he removed more than 400 priests convicted of sex abuse from the clerical state. He met with victims of clerical abuse 5 times during his international trips, and he exonerated the entire Church to a profound conversion and purification through acts of penance. In 2010, a letter to Irish Catholics was symbolic of his approach. He asked for forgiveness of abuse victims and strongly condemned priests and religious that stain the face of the Church with these crimes and sins.
Tristezza anche che l'autorità della Chiesa.
There is also sadness that the Church authority was not sufficiently vigilant, nor sufficiently quick and decisive to take necessary measures to stop the abuse and prevent it from occurring again. Because of all this, we are going through a period of penance, of humility, and of renewed sincerity, as I wrote to the Irish bishops. It seems to me, we really have to go through times of penance and humility, and we have to renew and learn sincerity again.
E rinnovare e reimparare una assoluta sincerità.
Under Joseph Ratzinger as Cardinal and then as Pope, progress was made in the Church's handling of abuse. Bishops have the moral and legal duty to provide an adequate response to these crimes, to care for the permanent formation of the clergy, to listen to victims and their families, and to cooperate with the civil authorities. The accusations brought against Benedict in the Munich report weigh heavily, and while Benedict denies any wrongdoing during his time as Archbishop, the Vatican points to his fight against abuse as head of the Congregation of Faith and then later as Pope.